Chernobyl. Oh, and so now that I'm recording, I just wanted to say one other thing. So let's talk about your designs. So I need to leave school like before I see the other section on Monday. So I wanted them to hear this. We already talked about the other stuff 2 classes ago. All right, so some of you were here and you carried out your designs on Wednesday. Those of you that weren't here, you obviously still need to carry them out. I know some of you did already in the open lab on Tuesday. Some of you may have done it at home already. If you didn't already do it, like you need to. And I would say by this coming Tuesday at the latest. If you can do it at home, go ahead and do it at home. If not, sign yourself up for after school Tuesday. If you are doing it at home, I want some sort of like photographic or videographic like evidence of your setup. Right, so there's just no doubt that when I sign off on that, that it is data that you collected and didn't just make up. Once you have your data, right, I haven't formally assessed your designs yet, for the design criteria. One of the reasons I wanted you to collect data was for you to get a sense of if you were identifying enough control variables and if you were controlling stuff, well enough. So if you didn't, go ahead and change, your design. You'll have to collect data again, but go ahead and change your design if you have found pretty big holes that would prevent you from scoring well. So I am going to want you to resubmit the procedure, the variables, the electronic diagram. I want your raw data, and I do want a graph of your independent versus dependent variable with error bars. Other than that, the only thing I want right now is like one paragraph evaluating your data. Where am I? Evaluating your data and assessing whether you controlled enough stuff and if you controlled those things well enough. Amanda, we were right? Yeah, all right. So if you're gonna change your design and like do it over again, you still do this for your first go through, right? And then you would redo it and then hand that in again later. The due date is going to be like our second meeting after spring break. That way you don't have to do it right now and you don't have to do it during spring break either. And that's going to count as a 50-point secondary assessment grade for 4th marking period. Hi.
If we're redoing it, is it due the 23rd and 24th as well?
This is due the 23rd and 24th. If you're going to redo it, then we can talk and figure out a different due date, right? I don't have a date in mind if you're kind of starting from scratch. All right. Any other issues with next steps for the design? Great, fantastic. All right. So 3 Mile Island, right? That was Pennsylvania, right? Not so far away, like central Pennsylvania. You could drive there in like 2.5 hours. And this was 1979. So that's not too bad. We already had 15 years of producing electricity using nuclear fission with no significant incidents. Now, 1979 was kind of important because right before this incident happened, there was like a blockbuster Hollywood movie about a nuclear catastrophe called The China Syndrome. So yeah, the timing was, it couldn't have been worse to have like the world's first nuclear accident. So again, this is right outside of Harrisburg. You can still see the plant. Well, I'm pretty sure that they don't make electricity anymore. I mean, they just, once there's something goes wrong, like you're not going to do that to the community. You're not going to keep producing power there. We say, 20 whatever years later, 30 years later, that there was a partial meltdown. Now, I don't really know how you have a partial meltdown. You either melt the fuel or you don't. But it probably is just the case that we're not actually sure if the fuel really melted or not. We believe that a little bit of radioactive gas did escape the reactor and the containment structure. We don't think that anybody got sick or had significant radiation exposure as a result of this. But if we have gas escape, that is problematic, like biologically, because iodine, a few different isotopes, a few different radioactive isotopes of iodine are in these fission products. And did some of you have iodine for your medical isotope, or was it all in the other section? Yeah, I think there were like 3 of them in the other section that had iodine. We use iodine for anything and everything involving the thyroid. The thyroid just essentially sucks up any iodine that your body is exposed to. So we do have major concerns if there are fission plant problems because we care about thyroid cancer and and being exposed to radiation like in that area. So small amounts of iodine were detected. I don't think there's consensus. I know there's not consensus, but we don't think anybody's health had a problem as a result of 3 Mile Island. So what the heck happened? We know that we have 3 loops of water in these fission reactors. We have that primary loop, which usually serves as the moderator and gets super hot and super pressurized. We have the secondary loop where we generate the steam and drive the turbine, and then we have the third loop where we then cool that second loop water down. So we had a problem in that secondary system, and then we just didn't really respond right. So we had a problem in the second system, but we let that cause a problem in the primary system as well. So a valve in the primary water system got stuck like in the open position, meaning water could leave the reactor chamber. And if we don't have enough water in the reactor chamber, then the hot fuel rods aren't losing their heat and they get too hot and melt. So we think that's what happened. The operators just didn't recognize right away that they did have that open valve. If they recognized it sooner, they could have fixed it in time, but they were probably freaking out since they knew there was a problem in the secondary system. So they just, it's not really human error that caused the initial problem, but they could have handled it better and prevented that partial meltdown. Yeah, Liam.
Did they still have like control rods and like all their like?
Oh yeah, there was no, yeah, so in all of these, like the control rods worked fine. Or at least in this one, my understanding is the control rods worked fine, shut off the fissioning. So once we had that problem, the fissioning stopped, but we still have a lot of heat that continues to be generated because of the highly radioactive fission products, right? So yes, I don't believe there was any problem with the control rods. Yeah?
The guys that they operate the nuclear reactors, is it like an engineer or something, or are they just like guys that work in like a coal power plant or something?
I mean, you're going to have well-trained people on site. So I was able to visit the Linden natural gas cogeneration plant this past summer, and I got to see the facility. I got to see where these people work, and I didn't really know what to expect. But so I walk in, and it's loud. Everything's super loud, but it's like an office, right? And with computer monitors, and there's people sitting at the computer monitors, watching, just kind of watching the temperatures and the pressures and whatnot. And they're relaxed and they're joking around and stuff. There's going to be somebody in charge that's well trained. Now the reason I was able to get into this plant is that a friend of mine is one of these people that sits at those computer terminals. He does not have a college degree, but at least somebody on site is going to be a nuclear engineer if we're talking about a nuclear plant. I think we all learn a lot of things from The Simpsons. I hope there's not Homer Simpsons working at real nuclear power plants, but I think that could be possible that people without that kind of intelligence might be in charge of small pieces of things. All right, so let's look on the other ones, and then we'll see if we have follow-up questions once we get through them. So the next incident wasn't that long after the first one, so 1986. 1986 was a bad year. That was our Exxon Valdez disaster also. I think there was a third bad thing that's escaping me right now. But 1986 in the Ukraine, so it was Soviet Union at the time, but now it's the Ukraine. I think last year, my juniors told me that Mrs. Eugenblick was there and present and yep. So
She was
you
like
guys about
50 miles away.
She was how many?
Like 50 miles
50 miles. Yeah, 50 miles is kind of close if something super bad happens.
So all the rich kids started moving.
So in Chernobyl,
Rich kids started moving.
this was, well, maybe Fukushima was worse. I think the jury's still out. But there was definitely lots of radioactive stuff that left the reactor core. So we had a power surge, and that just happens sometimes, right? So we could just have a larger neutron flux than usual. We could have more neutrons, make it through the control rods, past the control rods than normal. So power surges themselves aren't that atypical. We had a power surge that worried the operators enough that they initiated an emergency shutdown. So control rods all the way down. And then they did that, and then they actually had a larger power surge, which we shouldn't have. Once the control rods are down, that should cut off further fissions. But remember, it's actually the temperature that generates the electricity. So even in our simulation, was it 2 classes ago? Did anybody still generate power when you put your control rods down the whole way? So at least a few of you did, right? that makes sense because the fission products are hot, they're radioactive, they're still producing heat. So we actually can and will still produce power once the fission's stopped. All right, so we had another power surge, and then we did get a rupture, right, in our reactor. That's terrible. It's like the last thing you want to happen, because then we do have the ability to let the coolant escape and fission products escape. Now this plant was not a water moderator plant. We didn't use water to slow down the neutrons. They used graphite. I don't remember if that was part of the significant problem here. If we had water, and that would have just left also, and we would have had, well, we would have had no moderator. So even if the control rods didn't work, we wouldn't have had fissions. But if the water's gone, the fuel rods aren't giving their heat away to anything else. Water's not going to burn, right? The graphite moderator in this plant did burn. That probably wasn't good. Producing smoke right next to the fuel rods, I mean, that's going to put radioactive particles from the fuel rods into that smoke. That's a problem. But I think if they had a water moderator, we still would have had major problems. So this like burning stuff that had radioactive smoke got really far away, all the way to the United Kingdom. I think in Ireland they had to destroy crops because of radioactive contamination from this smoke. Finland, they had to destroy crops, like super far away places. This stuff definitely reached. We did have deaths attributed to this, so about 60 just deaths from people at the plant that died from the fires, from the explosions, like whatever, acute radiation poisoning. And then we don't know, but maybe on the order of 50,000 extra cancer cases. I mean, we really don't know. We can look at statistics and say, hey, there was more cancer here than there should have been based on this population, but it's kind of impossible to say. But definitely, human life was lost as a result of this. And then we went, how long? 25 years before we had another incident, just 3 years ago. So this one was in Japan. We had an earthquake, right? Japan gets earthquakes every week, right? Way more than Los Angeles gets. So that's not that abnormal. This was a very large earthquake, and the nuclear power plants are designed to shut down. When there's an earthquake, of course they're going to shut down. So the control rods get inserted, the fission stops, and that worked absolutely fine. Right? The plant shut down when the earthquake hit. And most of the plants will actually get their electricity from themselves. So there's a backup generator system because we still have to pump water, we still have to circulate water to keep cooling the fuel rods and to keep cooling the secondary system. And that worked fine too. Right? The generators kicked on, we kept circulating water. So the problem wasn't really the earthquake, the problem was the tsunami and the fact that this power plant was right at the water. So we got major rise in water that flooded everything, right? So they flooded, most importantly, they flooded the generators. Don't drive your car into a lake, right? Your car's not going to work so well if your engine is submerged. Neither are these generators. And generators are the same thing as your car engine, just way bigger. So that was the problem, right? The generator stopped working. We need to keep circulating water or stuff gets too hot and then we will melt the fuel and have a meltdown. But we kind of have a little bit of time to deal with that. And there's a backup system. So what was the other backup system besides the generator to get this plant powered?
Hydro.
Was it flooding with seawater?
Well, no, we did that down the road. Now, what was the other backup system to get electricity to the pumps? Nobody remembers?
Places?
What? You say roller coasters?
No, I said other places with electricity.
I don't know if I have any power. Batteries. Right? It's batteries.
There you go.
Big batteries.
AAA.
And I mean, they have them, and that's fine, and that gets you a few hours. But if you need to use your batteries, that's a major problem. They're not going to last very long. Right? So they used their batteries, and they couldn't really get any other batteries because these are custom-made batteries. You can't, just your cell phone batteries, custom-made. You can't just take a battery out of your friend's cell phone. They make specific batteries, so you have to spend more money. So that was the problem, and then stuff did overheat, and we definitely had a meltdown. We definitely had fuel melt. Now, we did try some other things to keep stuff cooler to try and prevent the meltdown. So Jordan's right, we did literal, well, there's a picture here. We used like fire boats to pump seawater on top of this stuff, but that's not ideal, obviously. When we do use seawater to cool the plant, we're going to get hydrogen explosions. Seawater is way more prone to dissociating into hydrogen and oxygen than like fresh water is, or certainly contained water. So once we do seawater, that clinches we'll never use that plant again. And I remember lots of like television reports of exploding stuff. That was the containment structure that was exploding, because we do have hydrogen buildup like inside the containment structure. So the reactor cores themselves didn't like blow up. That wasn't the explosions, but the containment structures would. But when we do get, we're using external water to try and cool off the reactor, that water is going to carry away radioactive material. So I don't know, like, if we know the full picture in terms of, how many people have died as a result of this. I don't know if anybody's died as a result of this. I don't remember if there were deaths at the plant, but jury's still out, I think, on if this was worse than Chernobyl or not. Jordan.
Why was it when the seawater was added that it made the plant unusable?
Yeah, so the salt water, in addition to being able to more easily dissociate into oxygen and hydrogen, is just super corrosive. Like if you live in a shore town, you don't want to drive your car through puddles even, because if you start getting like salt water in like the metal parts of your car, like it's just your car's going to deteriorate way faster. So salt water just does chemistry better than fresh water. Yeah, Patrick.
Do you think we were able to handle like Fukushima better because they kind of saw it coming?
True. Well, I mean, they don't see the earthquake coming.
Yeah, but they saw this.
And even like the flood water.